Georgianne asked me why I go to so many schools and why we both do and why we so enjoy speaking to education groups. And I say there's a number of reasons for it. Not only do we feel very strongly about the value of public education, what we can do to support it, but I also like the groups that when you step up, they actually get quiet for a moment. Thank you, Phil and Carter and everybody else here. It is really good to see this group here in the Capitol today. And it's really an important part and time in the journey toward a goal we share, giving every Missouri child and every Missouri community the opportunity to achieve his or her dreams. And quite frankly, we're at a defining moment. Over the past 5 years, we have weathered some tough economic challenges, and to make ends meet, we had to make tough choices. Each one of you on the boards you serve and the communities you serve were part of those choices, and I thank you for your leadership. But we never wavered from the values we share. That public funds should be used for public schools, that our economy cannot thrive if our students aren't prepared, and that the way to improve our schools is by raising them up, not tearing them down. And today, you know what? Our efforts are paying off in a lot of ways across our great state. Economically, our unemployment rate recently dropped below 6% for the first time since June of 2008. Let me just give you one example of that, because there are folks out there that say, that say concretely, what are we doing to move forward? Just 3 weeks ago, I had one of those outstanding weeks you have as governor sometime. I had gone to Detroit, to the Detroit Auto Show again. You know, as most of you know, the first executive order I signed as governor was the Auto Jobs Task Force in January of 2009, not exactly a time which people were talking about building new cars, but I knew that they would be built somewhere, the cars of the future, and we wanted them to be built in Missouri. But we have been working on that automotive industry for a long time. But on Sunday in Detroit, I had the chance with the new CEO of GM, Mary Barra, first female CEO of a major American auto company in our country's history, to unveil a brand new Chevrolet Canyon, which is a mid-sized pickup truck that's going to be made in Wentzville. And for those of you driving those Toyota products made in Texas in that same line, you'll have an opportunity to get a little bit better product made in a show-me state. The next morning, I started the morning with Alan Mullally and the senior management team of Ford, where they unveiled the brand new F-150 that's going to be made in Kansas City. And then later that day, we announced the 1,000th worker that'd be hired on the new transit van, the vehicle that we're insourcing from Europe to be made in Clay Como, 1,000 more jobs there. And then that night in Warrensburg, Missouri, Janesville Acoustics announced that they were coming to Missouri, 150 new jobs in that advanced manufacturing sector right there, making that our 13th new plant for the auto sector in the Show Me State. Now, I use that just as an example of how our twin focus on making sure we had fiscal discipline and making sure that we had an education system that could deliver, but also on making sure that as this economy turned to an economy of the world instead of a local economy, that we were doing what it took to make sure we had a workforce that could deliver. For example, these jobs, these high-tech new auto manufacturing jobs are hand in glove now with technology jobs in our state. And it should be noted that recent report just last week showed that Missouri was #1 in the rate of technology growth of any state in the country for the second year in a row, okay? Now, I'm not here to talk about tech jobs or to talk about auto jobs, but I use that to indicate to everybody that because of our fiscal discipline, because of our focus, our economy is growing again. So the choice before us, the defining moment before us, after withstanding the greatest economic downturn, at least in my life, and as we work our way out of that, what to do with the benefits of a growing economy. How do we invest those dollars to get the most significant impact, both short run, but more importantly, long run for the state. The choice before us is how to invest these resources in a way that will pack the biggest punch for our economy in a highly competitive global marketplace. The answer is clear. Nothing will have a greater impact on our future than the commitment we make right now to public education. It's pretty simple. Good schools mean good jobs. Okay? It's not really that complicated. That's why, as we're moving forward, the budget I introduced has $278 million for our K through 12 classrooms for the foundation formula, get to fully funding that formula in 2 years. That's why we also tripled the funding for Missouri preschool programs and increased funding for transportation by $15 million. Those are solid investments in your districts. And the thing I ask back for those is, first of all, let's all work to make sure we get those numbers through the process over there up on the Hill. But also, at your local levels, help us amplify in a specific way what these additional resources will mean in your districts. You know, when I say things like $278 million or $15 million for transportation or triple the preschool program or whatever, that's kind of government speak. The numbers are so big that people don't really kind of figure what they are. But in your districts, when you look at your board meetings and with your superintendents, what you can provide to your communities with these additional resources and communicating those precisely out there is extremely helpful to us. Localizing these issues is extremely vital and makes a real and lasting difference. Now, why am I so focused on funding the foundation formula? Because quite frankly, I'm old enough to remember that 9 years ago, the legislature and the governor passed this formula, making a promise to our students in our schools. Today, with the economy picking up steam, there are, and quite frankly, in my opinion, no more excuses. As I said in my stated address, it's time to put our budgets where our campaign brochures are and get serious about fully funding our schools. Okay? And when I say defining moments, I mean it. I mean, because literally everybody, when they run for office, I mean, some of you may have lasted this long in my State of the State. I appreciate all of you probably turned it on at the beginning and saw that there was a rerun of Matlock that was out there drawing you to it away from a 40-minute speech by me. But I looked right down into the well of the legislature, and I told them, I've had the opportunity, quite frankly, more than anybody there with my length of service, to campaign and to appear and to work in all corners of the state and look forward to the next 3 years of doing just that. I've never run into anybody running for office that said they didn't support public education. I've never run into anybody that said they didn't support schools and all that sort of stuff. Well, we get these moments, these defining moments where you can see whether they actually do or not, and that's why I'm taking so much time talking about it. So over the last few weeks, I've had the opportunity to visit classrooms in Hannibal, Kansas City, O'Fallon, Jackson, Joplin, Cassville, Cape Girardeau, Springfield, Savannah, to see firsthand how these additional dollars will enhance opportunities for students across our state. And like I've asked you, one of the reasons that we've gone to some of these schools is not only because they're excellent schools. In Cassville, for example, they'll hire more teachers and reduce class sizes. In Savannah, they're going to expand access to technology and put Wi-Fi in more classrooms. In Jackson, the district will be able to recruit the best and brightest teachers by boosting salaries. And in Springfield, 3,000 kids will gain access to early childhood education. And with these significant investments that we're making, we're going to demand real returns and measurable results, more challenging courses, higher test scores, and increased graduation rate. Quite frankly, as we all know, we're all taxpayers too. With higher funding come higher expectations. Now, it's important to note that we have these resources in no small measure because of the efforts many people in this room made last summer, when you joined parents, teachers, administrators, business leaders, and concerned citizens to help sustain my veto of House Bill 253. Together, you reminded your elected leaders that here in Missouri, public education isn't a political position, it is a value. Together, you showed the nation that ordinary folks united in a common purpose can go head-to-head with the biggest war chest and win. And together, you scored a decisive victory for our schools and our state. And I just want to say what a huge difference that makes. I mean, look at where we are and where we would be if we had not been successful in that effort. Today, instead of having to make cuts, we're able to make investments. Today, instead of having to step back from obligations to our students, we can step forward. Today, instead of having to hunker down and settle for less, we can aim high for a brighter future for our students in our state. And on behalf of those students, I want to thank your association and the individual boards that stood up strong last year. I did, I knew, I told somebody else this story. I did 37 town hall meetings last summer, all across the state. And people say, wow, that's a lot of work, and when did you think you were going to succeed? And I told the folks there were a couple of times where I felt like we got traction. One of them, we were up there, folks were probably here from Centralia. We went to Centralia, and there was about 150 people that showed up, and we had a really good discussion, open public discussion, taking questions about why it was so important for us to have the resources to move forward and why 253 was such bad policy for the state. And so we felt good about the session. It was a really good turnout, some really challenging questions that were dealt with. And so I go back into the board meeting room there to thank the local superintendent and the board members that had been with us before we had to head out. I turned to the superintendent, and he looked at me and he said, well, where are you going tomorrow? And I said, well, we're going to continue to work on this. We're going to Gainesville tomorrow. And he said, we had a wonderful time in Gainesville when we were there last year. I mean, when Mizzou played Florida, and we were down in Gainesville for that game, we almost won, but it was a really nice trip. And I said, not that Gainesville, okay? I actually like our Gainesville pretty well too. I mean, it's great fishing down in that part of the state. But we did down there, and I head down with the Bulldogs in Gainesville, and they're a wonderful school. So there were many opportunities over the summer. But the thing that I found, looking at last summer, was how respectful Missourians were during these discussions. You get here in Jeff City, and the discussions get hyper partisan and hyper hot, and people bark things at each other or tweet things at each other or whatever they do up there. And then you go back to these communities, and you have an open forum as chief executive of the state, and people are incredibly respectful, thoughtful, and then they followed through and led. And quite frankly, I just want to say none of that would have been possible without the help of this organization and the individual board members and community leaders that helped us, and I thank you. Now, so as we look forward, what are the challenges facing us? I mean, first of all, we all believe that public funds should be used for public schools, and we're all certainly aware, looking at the front page of the Post-Dispatch today, that there's an effort, well-meaning, they can do what they want, but an effort underway to take public money and use it for private schools in a voucher program. I mean, folks, Missourians feel strongly about this. And while folks have First Amendment rights and they can put things out there that they want to, I think it's extremely important that we remain united in the efforts around vouchers, because public funds belong to public schools, and with all of that public money comes all the oversight you get and all of the things that everybody does and whatnot to make sure you're performing well. But it's just that simple. A second issue is there continues to be an ongoing effort to undermine the fiscal position of the state. And I want to say a couple things about that. I've never been opposed to making responsible changes to our tax code. As governor, 4 times I've cut taxes, but each one of those times there was a twin set of requirements. The first was that any tax cut would be focused on creating jobs. That's why during the height of the recession we gave a deduction for a period of time to small businesses to give them confidence to move forward. That's why we're phasing out that franchise tax once again on small businesses so they don't have double taxation. That's why we've targeted military retirees for their next career coming to Missouri and are lowering the tax burden there. And that's why when we make strategic investments like we did with Ford and GM, that it's worth, But the second piece is it's got to be affordable. We do not need risky experiments with our tax code at a time when the economy is moving forward, where the fiscal discipline of this state has been recognized and respected, and we're continuing to get significant investments and unemployment go down. So with that being said, I have certainly engaged and will continue to engage in discussions with members of the legislature about these issues to try to find, the right way if they do want to move some revenue in those areas. But it's got to be a way that protects our investments in our classrooms and gives a break to the folks that really need it. We've had some good discussions with Senator Will Krause and others, and here's what I've specifically said to them. So you're part of the discussion, and what I would want if they were going to move forward any sort of tax bill. First, we cannot and will not jeopardize the best economic development tool we have, public education. To that end, I will not support any tax cut of any site that prevents us from fully funding the state's K-12 foundation formula. We're on our way to getting it funded, and we need to get that done. You just see the horizon. It's right out there. Just, a year from now to begin to do that may seem like eternity to some, but it does not to me. And when you get that close to a goal that significant, you want to make it. You might want to make it done. You want to get it done. The second way to make sure a tax cut for working families is affordable is to finally reform our state's most expensive and least efficient tax credit expenditures. And quite frankly, it's a question of fairness. For too long, these programs have allowed special interests and wealthy developers to reap massive windfalls at taxpayer expense. So tightening those programs, lessening the amount of expenditures in those areas, is a good thing to do. And I think it needs to be part of this discussion. We're in a time frame where getting tax credit reform not only is important for making those tax credits work better, but also gives us economic savings that will allow us to put those dollars and use those dollars more efficiently and effectively. And finally, I'm not going to support tax gimmicks that only reward creative accounting instead of a hard day's work. I mean, if we're going to make a minor cut to taxes, we should do it for the benefit of working Missourians. Some of these provisions last year that just said if you change the name of your company or you change the formation of it, that you automatically get some sort of tax break, that's just not good policy for the state. You need to really, really narrowly look at this sort of stuff. That's why, I think we've made some progress. Report that Senator Krause has announced that he's putting forward a bill that's consistent with these principles. This legislation would have a small 0.25% income tax cut on working Missourians, but only after Missouri's K-12 foundation is fully funded and only when the state revenues grow by $200 million in that same time period. This is the kind of, if you're going to have a reasonable tax cut, this is the kind that would allow us to meet our priorities. And once again, and to ensure the tax credit is affordable, we must offset a significant portion of that cost with the reforms for our most costly tax credit programs. I mean, there is the workings of an opportunity there. Protecting and investing in our public schools, reining in wasteful tax credits that benefit special interests, and putting poor money in the pockets of working Missourians. These are basic elements of a sensible and sustainable tax bill that I would sign. But make no mistake, if they get beyond these parameters, that pen works on both sides of the bottom of a bill. You can either sign the part that makes it law or you can sign the part that doesn't. And I've made it very clear to everybody that we're going to stay in these narrow parameters. And if we don't stay in these narrow parameters, then I'll be coming to a neighborhood near you once again. I'm just not going to support things that take money out of our classrooms, and I'm just not going to support something that continues to reward certain parts of the economy while holding our kids back. It was Missouri's own Harry Truman in 1948 that said, and I quote, "Without a strong educational system, democracy is crippled. Knowledge is not only key to power, it is the citadel of human freedom." Now, the reason I quote him as I round the track to get finished with this discussion this morning is one of the great things that public education provides. By the very nature of what we do, the fact that every kid, regardless of background, wherever they're from, is provided and afforded the best opportunity that we in our communities can provide to give them the ability to live up to their God-given potential. But one of the other things that schools do is to provide an open forum in a community for folks to become critical thinkers, which is exceptionally important in the public discourse world that we have going on right now. It's so very simple for folks to say what is wrong with somebody else's argument. It's so very simple for people to lecture others based on what they hear on talk radio or with people screaming at each other on the cable news things at night. But much more important than that is the place we are and the arc of history that we're in and the moments of responsibility that we have right now, to make sure that at this time, as we have weathered an economic challenge and we get moving forward, that what we do not only makes things better this year and next year, but sets the framework for long-term, continued excellence improvement in the public education system of our state. And that is a system that must reflect the great diversities and challenges at the local level. And this system we have designed gives to you, local school board members, that direct legal responsibility to reflect your communities and at the same time be just a little bit ahead of them. You know, to be not so distant from them that what you say doesn't make sense. But each of you were elected to lead, not just to maintain. No one here ran for school board or was appointed superintendent under the platform of, put me in, I'll do exactly what they did last year and we'll stay exactly the same. Okay. Well, the reason I mention that, and the reason I conclude with this, is there are those on the other side that talk about radical reforms to education, dramatically changing things, that aren't willing to do what you have done. Put yourself up for election in your local communities. And believe me, I understand how difficult school board is. My mom was on the school board, was president of the school board, and other than getting to hand me my diploma when I graduated, there weren't a whole lot of perks. But I know that she knows and we know that she had higher expectations and higher. The reason I mention that as I close here is the folks that are against us, the folks that want to have vouchers, the folks that want to get rid of tenure, the folks that think the solution here is to defund public schools and tell communities that they're consumers and it's their job to drive around the state and figure out where there's a school that they like and then each day drive for a couple hours because they like that school a little better than the other one. That instead the system that we are improving is a system of education that puts a responsibility on communities through their board members to reflect what's been done and to define the future. So I conclude with one example of how close the tie is between education and where our economy goes in this state. After World War II, we had at one point 21 million people in uniform. So the war ends, and you have 20 million soldiers coming home. Now, welcome that to an economy. There weren't 20 million jobs here. So Missouri and Champ Clark and others passed the original GI Bill. And folks like my dad, when he got back, went to the University of Missouri, and when he signed up for classes, he just signed a piece of paper, and that bill went to the federal government, and they paid it. And when he went to the bookstore, he signed a piece of paper, and they gave him his books. And he, like millions and millions and millions of others, for many for the first time in their families, used education. So between 1940 and 1950, the number of degrees in this country at the higher education level doubled. And in the next generation, they quintupled. When you don't have anything to do and you really can't sleep at night, look at the growth of the economy of our country vis-a-vis the world, and look at that graph as it chases people getting more education. And if you look at that same 40 years as we move from doubling to quintupling, to making college something that's not abnormal, but that a majority of kids now graduating from high school are heading towards our goal of 60% in just the next few years with degrees beyond high school. And you look at where the economy of our country went, that graph makes it totally clear that as the world is flattening and the marketplace for jobs and the marketplace for opportunity is no longer just locally or regionally, that the only way for us to win and continue to lead is to demand more, provide more, and lead the world. Because if we don't, the next 40 or 50 years will see us risk that preeminence and lose that edge. So it may be hard for you when you're sitting at a school board meeting in Cassville or Gainesville or Puxico or whatever to think you're on the cutting edge, you're the next greatest generation, or that you're on the cutting edge of what we're going to do to succeed with this economy. But I want to tell you, as your governor, you are. Getting more kids in preschool and ready to go, you just are, okay? And so I ask you to reflect your communities, but reflect the best of their communities, and to challenge everybody involved in public education. People want to have a say in where we ought to take public education in this state and in this country. I listen to people that are participants in the process, not people that are spectators. I do not want to spend a great deal of time with critics about what we can do to make ourselves better. I want to deal with people that, like you, are giving up all or part of their lives to make a real difference with the best economic opportunity we can provide our kids and improving excellent public education. Thank you, and God bless.